The first explosion tears through the dawn at 0542 hours, then another, then four more in rapid succession. 6 Royal Air Force fighters shatter before their wheels ever leave the tarmac. The Luftwaffe pilot banking overhead never fires a shot. He simply watches the chain reaction below and turns for home. On the ground, amid smoke and twisted aluminum, a single man stands vindicated. They called his idea medieval, obsolete, a waste of wire and engineering hours. Spring 1940. The air war over Europe has become a mathematics problem no one can solve. German bombers cross the Channel in formations so tight they blot out patches of sky. Hurricanes and Spitfires scramble upward, burning fuel and precious seconds just to reach combat altitude. But it is the fighters on the ground that die most often. Caught while taxiing, destroyed while pilots sprint toward cockpits, annihilated in neat rows, wingtip to wingtip, before a single engine coughs to life. RAF Fighter Command calls it the scramble problem. Radar gives warning. Observers telephone coordinates. Air crews run. But the gap between alarm and altitude is a killing field measured in minutes. Luftwaffe pilots learn to hunt during that window. They come in low, strafing grass and asphalt, turning air bases into bonfires. Station commanders try dispersal. They scatter aircraft across fields, hide them under camouflage nets, park them in revetments. It helps. But revetments take weeks to build and require earth-moving equipment most stations do not have. The Germans adapt faster. They send fighter sweeps ahead of bomber streams, clearing the skies by clearing the runways first. Engineers propose solutions: concrete shelters, buried fuel lines, faster startup procedures, all logical, all too slow. Construction crews cannot outpace the Luftwaffe's operational tempo. Every fix requires resources Britain does not have, and time the calendar will not grant. Then a name surfaces in a maintenance log at RAF Kenley, a sector station south of London: Flight Lieutenant Wilfred Truelove. Not a pilot, not a tactician, a technical officer responsible for keeping machines airborne. His proposal reaches group headquarters in a manila folder marked low priority. The summary is 3 paragraphs. The diagram looks like something from a siege engine manual. Most officers read it once and set it aside. One calls it medieval to his face. Another suggests Truelove stick to oil changes and tire pressure. But the sector commander at Kenley has watched too many aircraft burn before breakfast. He gives Truelove 72 hours and whatever scrap materials the base can spare. If this history matters to you, tap like and subscribe. Wilfred Truelove grew up in the shadow of Canterbury Cathedral, where his father repaired clocks, gears and springs, escapements and counterweights, the logic of energy stored and released. By 14, Truelove could disassemble a watch movement blindfolded. By 16, he was apprenticing with an automotive engineer in Maidstone, learning how combustion engines translated fuel into motion. He joined the RAF in 1936, not as air crew, but as a technical specialist. The service needed men who understood metal fatigue and hydraulic pressure, men who could read a schematic and translate it into a field repair with 3 tools and a length of wire. Truelove was quiet, methodical, the sort of airman who noticed when a bolt was over-torqued or a fuel mixture ran too rich. At Kenley, he became the officer pilots sought when something was wrong, but the manual offered no answer. He could listen to an engine and diagnose a failing magneto. He could feel a control cable and know it would snap in 2 more sorties. His logbook was filled with marginal notes, sketches, and small innovations that never made it into official reports. He was not a theorist. He simply watched. And in the spring of 1940, what he watched was waste. Aircraft destroyed not in combat, but in the 30 seconds between ignition and takeoff. Pilots killed while still on the ground. The calculus was brutal. Germany could replace bombers faster than Britain could replace fighters, and fighters died fastest when they could not fight back. Truelove began spending evenings walking the perimeter of the airfield. He studied approach angles, noted terrain, watched how enemy aircraft came in along the tree line, low and fast, using the morning sun as cover. He asked himself a clockmaker's question. What stops motion most efficiently? The answer was old. Older than aviation. Older than engines. It was tension and inertia, a barrier that turns speed into catastrophe. The Luftwaffe owns the initiative. That is the problem no doctrine can solve. German pilots choose when and where to strike. British pilots react. Reaction requires time. Time requires survival. And survival in the spring of 1940 is a matter of seconds. Fighter Command tries everything. They station ground crews in blast shelters closer to the flight line. They pre-flight aircraft at dawn so pilots can scramble faster. They assign mechanics to sleep in cockpits during high-alert periods. None of it changes the equation. A Messerschmitt diving at 300 knots can close the distance from tree line to tarmac in under 20 seconds. A hurricane needs 90 seconds just to taxi into position. Engineers propose active defenses, anti-aircraft positions around the perimeter, smoke generators to obscure the field. Decoy aircraft made of wood and canvas. All are implemented, all prove insufficient. AA guns cannot track low-altitude fighters weaving through their own flak. Smoke drifts with the wind and blinds friendly pilots as often as enemy ones. Decoys work once, maybe twice, before reconnaissance photographs expose them. The doctrine manuals offer no guidance. Air warfare is still too new. There are no case studies for this kind of attrition. Naval theorists suggest studying coastal fortifications. Army officers recommend minefields. But mines cannot distinguish between a Spitfire and a Stuka, and a fortified airbase is simply a grounded air force. At a sector conference in late April, a group captain from Tangmere summarizes the situation in 8 words. We lose more aircraft on the ground than aloft. The room falls silent. Everyone knows it is true. No one knows what to do about it. Truelove is not at the conference. He is at Kenley, drafting his proposal on the back of a maintenance checklist. His idea is not elegant, it is not modern, it violates the aesthetics of aerial warfare, but it is grounded in physics older than flight itself. He brings the drawing to his commanding officer on a Tuesday morning. The sector commander, Wing Commander Thomas Prickman, studies it for 30 seconds. Then he looks up, asks Truelove if he is serious. Truelove says he is. Prickman asks if he understands how it looks. Truelove says he does. The drawing shows a grid of steel cables stretched across the airfield at precise intervals. Each cable is anchored to buried concrete blocks and tensioned with automotive springs, suspended 18 inches above the turf, painted to blend with grass, designed to be raised or lowered in under 10 seconds using a system of pulleys operated from slit trenches at the field's edge. The concept is simple. When enemy aircraft approach, ground crew yank the cables upward. They rise to 6 feet. Any fighter traveling at strafing speed hits the wire and disintegrates. Propeller blades shear off. Wings crumple. Fuselages tumble forward and ignite. The attackers destroy themselves. The RAF does nothing but wait. Prickman asks about friendly aircraft. Truelove explains the tension system. The cables lie flat during normal operations. Pilots taxi over them without noticing. Only during an attack do they rise. Observers in the trenches can see the difference between a Spitfire and a Messerschmitt at 1,500 yards. Enough time to decide. enough time to pull. The wing commander is skeptical, but desperate. He gives Truelove 3 days and access to the motor pool. Truelove recruits 4 mechanics and a welder. They scavenge materials from a bombed-out warehouse in Croydon, steel cable from a construction site, springs from wrecked lorries, concrete mix from a public works depot. Other officers hear about the project. Some laugh. One engineering lieutenant calls it a medieval contraption unbefitting a modern air force. A squadron leader suggests Truelove is wasting time that should be spent on real defenses. Truelove does not argue. He just keeps working. By Thursday, the first cable is strung across a disused section of the southern taxiway. Truelove tests the pulleys, watches the wire snap upward, measures the height, adjusts the spring tension, tests again. A small crowd gathers. No one believes it will work. But no one stops him either. Friday, 0400 hours. Truelove and his team finish the installation. 16 cables stretched across the primary approach path, each anchored at both ends, each connected to a central pulley station concealed in a sandbag emplacement 30 yards from the runway edge. The entire system weighs less than 800 pounds and cost the RAF exactly nothing. Every component is salvage. At 0530, the sector operations room receives a radar plot. Unidentified aircraft inbound from the southeast, low altitude, high speed. Estimated time to Kenley, 8 minutes. The scramble bell rings, pilots sprint, engines cough and roar. Truelove positions himself in the cable trench with 2 ground crew. They wait. The formation appears at 0542. 6 Messerschmitt BF 109s in a loose finger 4, flying at 50 feet. They cross the perimeter fence and open fire. Cannon shells chew up the grass. Tracers streak toward parked Hurricanes. The lead pilot does not see the cables. Neither does his wingman. The first Messerschmitt hits wire at 280 knots. The cable does not snap. It bends, absorbs energy, then springs taut. The impact is instantaneous. The propeller disintegrates. Shards of blade puncture the engine cowling. The fighter pitches forward, nose first, and cartwheels across the field. The fuel tanks rupture. Fire blooms orange and black. The second aircraft hits 0.3 of a second later. Same result. The third tries to pull up. Too late. The wire catches the landing gear. The aircraft flips inverted and slams into the turf at 200 knots. The fourth and fifth pilots see the carnage and brake left, but the cable grid is wider than they expect. Both catch wire on the wingtips. Control surfaces tear away. Both fighters spiral into the ground beyond the tree line. The sixth pilot banks hard right and escapes. He climbs, circles once, and departs southeast without firing another shot. The entire engagement lasts 11 seconds. On the ground, Truelove and his crew lower the cables. The field is littered with wreckage. 5 craters, 6 fuel fires, 0 RAF casualties. 3 Hurricanes taxi past the debris and take off into a sky already clear of threats. The pilots do not yet know what happened. They will learn later. For now, they just climb. Wing Commander Prickman walks the crash sites with a notebook. He counts impact points, measures debris fields, interviews the observers in the trench. Then he telephones group headquarters, tells them to send a technical team immediately, tells them Truelove was right. By noon, photographs of the wreckage are on desks at Fighter Command. By evening, an engineering team from Farnborough arrives to inspect the cable system. By Sunday, Truelove is summoned to Bentley Priory to brief Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding himself. Dowding listens without interrupting, asks 3 questions. How much does it cost? How fast can it be installed? How many aircraft has it saved? Truelove answers each in turn. Negligible. 48 hours. 6 so far, possibly more if the word spreads and the Luftwaffe changes tactics. Dowding approves immediate implementation at 12 forward airfields. He assigns Truelove to oversee the program, gives him a staff of 6, and authorization to requisition materials from any depot in southern England. Truelove salutes and returns to Kenley. He does not celebrate. There is too much work. Within 2 weeks, cable barriers are installed at Biggin Hill, Tangmere, Northolt, and Manston. Each system is adapted to local terrain. Some use natural drainage ditches for concealment. Others hide pulleys inside false haystacks. The materials remain scavenged. The cost remains zero. Luftwaffe intelligence notices the change in early June. Reconnaissance photos show unusual ground patterns near several airfields. Pilots report unexpected obstacles during low-level attacks. One after-action report describes wire traps resembling ancient fortifications. German planners adjust. They order fighters to attack from higher altitude or avoid strafing runs altogether. The adjustment saves British aircraft. Messerschmitts forced to attack from above lose accuracy. Bombs miss. Cannon fire scatters. RAF fighters get airborne before the shooting starts. The scramble problem does not disappear, but its lethality drops by 40% at equipped airfields. Maintenance logs show the data. Fewer aircraft written off, fewer ground crew casualties, fewer mornings cleaning blood from cockpits. Truelove's system is never mass-produced. It does not need to be. By midsummer, the Luftwaffe shifts focus to daylight bombing. The Battle of Britain begins in earnest. Tactical strafing becomes secondary. The cable barriers remain in place, but see less use. Some are removed to make way for runway expansions, others rust quietly in storage. But the concept spreads. Engineers in North Africa adapt the design for desert airstrips. Coastal Command trials a version using maritime nets. The Americans study it during training exercises in 1942. It never becomes doctrine. It remains a field expedient, a clever solution to a fleeting problem, exactly what it was meant to be. The official history of RAF Fighter Command mentions the cable barriers in a single footnote, 14 words, no attribution. Truelove is not named. His file remains buried in maintenance archives until the 1970s, when a graduate student researching airfield defenses uncovers the incident reports and traces them back to Kenley. Wilfred Truelove never flew in combat, never fired a gun in anger, never earned a medal that made the newspapers. He retired from the RAF in 1946 with the rank of squadron leader and returned to Canterbury. He opened a small engineering shop near the cathedral, repaired farm equipment, built custom tools, lived quietly. He died in 1983. His obituary in the local paper mentioned his RAF service in passing, did not mention the cables, did not mention the 6 fighters that never made it home. His family found the original drawings in a toolbox after his funeral, pencil on graph paper, stained with oil and faded by decades. They donated them to the Imperial War Museum. The museum filed them in a drawer marked miscellaneous field modifications. But the logic endures. Truelove understood something many strategists missed. Innovation is not always forward. Sometimes the solution to a modern problem is an ancient principle applied with precision. Tension, inertia, the physics of stopping motion before it becomes destruction. He did not reinvent warfare. He simply noticed what others overlooked. That speed is a vulnerability as much as an asset, that the ground is a weapon if you know how to use it, that a few hundred pounds of scrap metal placed correctly can achieve what tons of concrete and doctrine cannot. The airfields he protected are gone now. Kenley is a housing estate. Biggin Hill is a private airport. The cable systems were dismantled 70 years ago, but the principle survived. It shows up in modern runways designed to damage enemy aircraft during overruns, in barrier nets that stop jets from sliding off carrier decks, in the understanding that defense does not always mean armor. Sometimes it just means knowing where to place the wire. Truelove never wrote a memoir, never gave interviews, never sought recognition. He built a trap, watched it work, and went back to fixing airplanes. That was enough. The war did not need his philosophy. It needed his pulleys. And for a few critical weeks in 1940, those pulleys held a line no one else knew how to defend. There is no monument, no plaque at Kenley, just a footnote in a history most people will never read. But 6 German pilots who flew low over an English airfield one Friday morning learned a lesson older than aviation: that the medieval and the modern are separated only by the cleverness of the hand that builds the trap, and that sometimes the simplest answer is the one no one thinks to ask.